Hello guys, welcome back to another video in our series about photosynthesis. And in this video, this is the first video where we dive deep into the process of photosynthesis, as deep as A-level requires, of course. But we're gonna dive deep into the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis. The Calvin cycle is going to be covered in the next video. So photosynthesis, as we said, is a process in which plants make energy or make glucose from light energy, carbon dioxide, and water. And this happens inside the chloroplast. We already discussed the components of the chloroplasts in a previous video. So photosynthesis involves two reactions. So it's split into two reactions. One is called the light-dependent reaction, which means it requires light to occur. And this is the first reaction that happens in photosynthesis. So these reactions happen after each other. The first one is the light-dependent. And in the light-dependent, the plant is trying to trap light energy and make ATP from it. So this is the goal of the light-dependent reaction. Trap light energy and make ATP from it. On the other hand, after this reaction happens, the products of the light-dependent reaction are going to move to another process, which is the other half of photosynthesis, which is called the light-independent reaction. It does not depend on light anymore. So the role of light or sunlight is over. Now we move on to making glucose. This is the goal of the light-independent reaction, which is also called the Calvin cycle. The goal is to create glucose from ATP or from the products of the light-dependent reaction, right? So these are the same thing. When you read them in the question, asking you to explain the light-independent reaction, they mean the Calvin cycle. So today we're going to dive deep into the light-dependent reaction. And this reaction happens inside the thylakoid, the disc-like structure inside the chloroplast. Now we've already discussed the structure of a chloroplast and the components, so we're not going to discuss them again. But you have to know that the light-dependent reactions happen inside the thylakoid. This is the location of the light-dependent reaction. Now, to talk about light-dependent reaction, we need to understand the meaning of the term photophosphorylation. So photophosphorylation is a term combining two terms, which we've already covered before. Photo means light, and phosphorylation means the addition of a phosphate to ADP to make ATP. So basically, this is the reaction: ADP plus phosphate equals ATP. This reaction is called phosphorylation. And the use of light energy to do this phosphorylation is called photophosphorylation. So what we're doing in the light-dependent reaction is basically photophosphorylation. This is the process. What is the goal of the light-dependent reaction? So what is the light-dependent reaction trying to do? What do we want to get at the end of this reaction? There are three products. So I want to trap light from sunlight. I want to trap the energy that comes to me from light and convert this energy into a molecule that I can use. So the first thing I'm going to convert this energy to is ATP. So ATP is a molecule that is an energy carrier, and I want to load it with energy in the light-dependent reaction. So this energy that comes to me from light, I want to load it into a molecule of ATP. So the first product is ATP. The second product is reduced NADP. So I have a molecule of NADP. I'm going to use the energy from light to reduce NADP. So add a hydrogen to NADP and turn it into NADPH, which is going to carry my energy. So NADPH is a molecule that is going to carry my energy, just like ATP. So I'm carrying my energy in two different ways, in the form of ATP and in the form of NADPH. And these two are products of the light-dependent reaction. The third product, I'm not going to make much use of it. So the plant does not need it a lot, but it is an important part of the light-dependent reaction, which is photolysis. So we said photo means light. Again, photo means light. So with the use of light, I'm going to do what? I'm going to do lysis. Lysis is basically breaking down something, the opposite of synthesis. Lysis is the opposite of synthesis. So lysis is the process by which I'm going to break down using light. So photolysis. I'm going to break down something using light. And that something is water. So I need water in order to undergo photosynthesis. Remember, the equation for photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide and water. So now we get to use the water. Water is broken down into hydrogen and oxygen. So water is H2O, and when you break it down, you will get 2H plus, so two molecules or two ions of hydrogen and one ion of oxygen, or one atom of oxygen. So the hydrogen is going to be used by the plant. It's important for the plant. That's why it's breaking down water, to use the hydrogen. And we're going to talk about why it's important, the hydrogen, in the light-dependent reaction. The oxygen, the plant does not require it right now. So what the plant does with the oxygen is just release it into the atmosphere. In the equation, in the photosynthesis equation as well, there is oxygen release. So this is where the oxygen comes from, in the light-dependent reaction. This is also a very important question. They tend to ask you, in which reaction does oxygen get released? So I don't want you to get confused. The light-dependent reaction is the one that releases oxygen. So these are the three products. Sometimes this is also a question. What are the three products of the light-dependent reaction? The three products are ATP, NADPH, and oxygen. So how do we get these three products? How does this happen? From light, how do I get ATP, NADPH, and oxygen? So there are two processes that scientists believe happen in a plant in order to form these products. The first one is non-cyclic photophosphorylation, and the second one is cyclic photophosphorylation. The most common one and the most important one in your exam is non-cyclic. So we will focus on non-cyclic in detail, how non-cyclic happens, how non-cyclic photophosphorylation happens to make these three products. So let's start by talking about non-cyclic photophosphorylation. This is non-cyclic. Okay. So non-cyclic photophosphorylation happens, as we said, in the thylakoid, in the chloroplast, in the thylakoid, the discs that are stacked upon each other to make a granum. So inside the thylakoid, inside a single disc, in the membrane, there are chlorophyll pigments. And chlorophyll is responsible for trapping sunlight and trapping light energy. So this pigment is what is going to get me light energy from light. All right, so in order to understand how this process works, we need to understand what a photosystem means. So a photosystem is nothing but chlorophyll mixed with some proteins. So we have chlorophyll pigment mixed with some proteins to make a system, or you can call it a molecule. So this molecule is a photosystem, a system used to trap light. We have two photosystems in photosynthesis, photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. What is the difference between photosystem 1 and photosystem 2? The difference is in the type of chlorophyll that is present in the photosystem. So as you can see in this picture, photosystem 2, which is PS2, right here. Photosystem 2 contains chlorophyll that traps light at this wavelength, 680. And this is not important for your exam to know the wavelength of chlorophyll, but it's important to understand the difference between photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. The only difference is that they trap light at different wavelengths. They trap different wavelengths of light. Now, our process starts in photosystem 2. So it would make sense to start with photosystem 1, but no, this is not what happens. What happens is photosystem 2 is the first to start the light-dependent reaction. So what happens in photosystem 2? In photosystem 2, I have chlorophyll. I have a green pigment that is sitting here. And I have a lot of electrons, free electrons, just roaming around. These electrons in chlorophyll, inside of chlorophyll and inside of the photosystem, when they get exposed to light or light energy, they get excited. So this is the key word, excited. So they get excited. By excited, I mean they increase their energy. They increase in energy and they start moving around very quickly, just like a particle in chemistry. When you heat it up, it starts moving quickly and gets excited. Similarly, an electron here gets excited from light energy. So chlorophyll traps light energy, and this light energy excites an electron in chlorophyll. What happens to this electron? When it gets excited, it exits photosystem 2. It comes out. It comes out of photosystem 2. So when it comes out of photosystem 2, I need to replace it with another electron because I need to trap more light. Photosystem 2, its job is to trap light and excite electrons. So when the first electron gets excited and leaves photosystem 2, another electron has to take its place so that it gets excited also and leaves photosystem 2. So that the energy keeps on getting trapped and it keeps on forming. So where do I get this electron from? I don't have an unlimited supply of electrons. When I lose an electron, I have to get another one back from somewhere. And this gets us to step 2. Who's going to give us a new electron to photosystem 2? Water. So this step is called photolysis. Now is the time of photolysis. So photosystem 2, or the chloroplast, the thylakoid, inside the thylakoid, it gathers water, which comes to it from the roots. So this water is broken down into hydrogen, 2 hydrogen ions, and 1 oxygen atom. As I said, oxygen is not required in this process, so it is released into the atmosphere. So hydrogen, how is hydrogen helpful? When you break down water into hydrogen and oxygen, hydrogen contains electrons and protons. As you might have studied in chemistry, hydrogen contains electrons, protons, and neutrons. Hydrogen happens to contain only 1 electron. So every hydrogen atom contains 1 electron. And when it breaks down, when water breaks down, this hydrogen loses its electron to photosystem 2. So an electron from each hydrogen atom, here I have 2 hydrogen atoms, so 2 electrons go to photosystem 2. So this is how photosystem 2 gets its new electrons, from hydrogen ions, from hydrogen atoms inside water. So you break down water, you get hydrogen, hydrogen loses its electron to photosystem 2, and it becomes a hydrogen ion, meaning it has a positive charge. It has a positive charge because it lost an electron. It lost a negative charge. So now I have new electrons all the time coming in photosystem 2 by breaking down more and more water molecules to replenish or to reload more electrons into photosystem 2. Now, this completes the process of photolysis, and oxygen is released from the leaf. Now, this brings us to the most important step. How is ATP formed? How is ATP formed from this electron that gets excited? What happens to this electron that got excited and left photosystem 2? Now, I have an electron that got excited and left photosystem 2. So this electron, let's draw a graph here. This electron started off at 0 energy. It went up, got excited, and went up to the maximum energy it could reach to. This is the electron getting excited. So it reached a high energy level. We call this a high energy level. When it gets excited, it reaches a high energy level. Now my electron is in a high energy level and it left photosystem 2. This electron, like anything that has a lot of energy, starts gradually losing its energy. So it begins to fall down in energy. So electron transfer chain means the electron transferring its energy as it moves down. So it moves down the chain and keeps giving out this energy that it had. And as it gives out this energy that it had, the cell or the thylakoid uses this energy. It uses this energy to do something else. So this electron that is coming down or moving down the energy transport chain gives out its energy to the thylakoid membrane. It gives out its energy freely. This energy is used by the thylakoid membrane to do what? Now, as we said in step 2, hydrogen ions are abundant or are in big amounts inside the thylakoid, not in the stroma, inside the thylakoid. Why? Because water is being broken down inside the thylakoid. And as it's being broken down, it releases more and more hydrogen ions. So hydrogen ions are more inside the thylakoid than outside the thylakoid. So now what is the cell trying to do? The thylakoid is trying to move hydrogen from outside the thylakoid to inside the thylakoid, even though hydrogen ions are more inside the thylakoid, are in a bigger concentration inside the thylakoid. So this is called moving something against its concentration gradient. And for that, you need energy. You need active transport. So this is the active transport of hydrogen ions. This is what the thylakoid is doing. I'll tell you why it does that in a bit. Because what happens in hydrogen ions? What happens to all these hydrogen ions which are stacked or concentrated now inside the thylakoid? These hydrogen ions simply, they go to a carrier protein which allows hydrogen ions to move freely back outside the thylakoid, so back to the stroma. Why does it allow it to move? It just opens the gate. It opens the channel gate and allows all the hydrogens to move back. As they're moving back, they are moving by diffusion. So facilitated diffusion. This is facilitated diffusion using a carrier protein to move ions without using energy. Why without using energy? Because hydrogen ions are now more concentrated in the cell than out of the cell, and they want to move freely down their concentration gradient to an area of low concentration. So hydrogen ions move through this channel protein or this carrier protein, and when they do that, they give energy to the protein. So this protein has the enzyme ATP synthase inside of it. And this allows it to grab this energy, which is given away by these hydrogen ions moving across this channel protein. So ATP synthase uses all this energy given away to do what? To phosphorylate ADP and phosphate into ATP. So now I have my ATP molecule created because these hydrogen ions were allowed to move out of the thylakoid. And this whole thing is called chemiosmosis. This is the key word. This process is called chemiosmosis, making ATP by the movement of hydrogen ions down their concentration gradient into the stroma or out of the thylakoid. And now I have my ATP molecules. So now I made two products out of the three which I'm supposed to make in the light dependent reaction. The first one is oxygen and it got released. The second one is ATP. So now I have ATP, and the energy that I got from light is now trapped in this ATP molecule, and this ATP molecule can go and release this energy where it is needed. Now this brings us to step 4 and to the last product which I want to make out of this energy. Now we didn't finish the story of our electron, which got excited first and then it came down the energy transport chain, and now it has lost all of its energy and gotten back to step 1. So now, what happens to this electron after it loses its energy? Its role is not done. So this electron gets into photosystem 1. After it left photosystem 2, it lost all its energy and it got into photosystem 1. And photosystem 1 receives this electron and starts to accept light or trap light at a different wavelength. And when it traps light, the same electron gets excited again. So this electron moves up the electron transfer chain and gets excited again for the second time in photosystem 1. What happens to this electron? Again, it starts gradually losing its energy to the surroundings. And as it loses its energy, now it's in photosystem 1. So from photosystem 1, it starts losing its energy. As it loses its energy, it does what? As it loses its energy, this energy helps NADP to turn into reduced NADP. So it helps in adding a hydrogen ion into NADP. Where does this hydrogen ion come from? It comes from inside the thylakoid, because we have a lot of hydrogen ions which were formed by the photolysis of water into hydrogen and oxygen. So I have a lot of hydrogens inside the thylakoid. I use one of these hydrogens to take a coenzyme, which is NADP, and add a hydrogen to it. And where does this energy come from? This energy comes from the electron losing its energy to the surroundings for the second time. Where does the electron, which has lost its energy for the second time, where does it go? This electron loses its energy and goes to this hydrogen ion. We said before that hydrogen ion H+ is formed when hydrogen loses its electron to photosystem 2, sorry. So hydrogen ions need an electron. So this electron, after it's lost all its energy, now it has no purpose. So what it does is join back into the hydrogen ion. So this process, I can write it as H plus 1 electron, 1 E minus, equals H. So H is hydrogen ion, hydrogen atom. So this H, which is formed by the addition of this electron to hydrogen, goes and joins NADP to form NADPH. And this is my third product of the light-dependent reaction, NADPH, or reduced NADP. And this will carry my energy to the next stage. So this is the light-dependent reaction, specifically non-cyclic photophosphorylation. And this is how the plant traps light energy and makes ATP, NADPH, and oxygen from them. And in this process, it uses water as well. All right, that will be it and everything you need to know about the light-dependent reaction for A-levels. And in the next video, we're going to discuss the light-independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle. And we're going to continue this process until we get the final products of photosynthesis, which are glucose and oxygen.